In this video, I'm going to walk you through the steps of using virtual tables in Power Pages. So, virtual tables will be pointing to a SQL Server in the backend. As you can see in my screen, I have created a simple table called as cars, and it has three columns: ID, company, and make. And I've added a couple of records. So the goal is to surface this information in the Power Pages site. Now, before we do that, what we may need to do is one is create some sort of a virtual table in Power Platform. So in order to do that, I will create a solution. So I've already created a solution named as 30 May 2023. I'll click on new, I'll click on table and table from external data. It will ask me for adding a connection to the table. Now I have already created that connection over here, but I can show you how did I create that before. So I clicked on new connection and there are two options available: SharePoint and SQL Server. So I click on SQL Server and click on plus. The moment I click on create, it will give me an option to select an authentication type. I'll select SQL Server authentication. I'll put in the SQL Server name, database name, username, and the password. The moment I do that and I click on create, my connection will be established with the SQL Server in Azure. Now, I have already done that, so I won't go ahead and create those connections again. So I'll click SQL Server, I click on next. When I click on next, it will list down the tables which is available in SQL Server. So I've got cars, stones, and other tables. So let me select cars first and see what happens. Okay, the moment I click on cars and I click on next, it gives me an error that the table doesn't have a primary key. Okay, now I'm not going to use this table. I've just showed you for demonstration purpose that if your table does not have a primary key, then it will not allow you to move further. Okay, so as you see in the Azure Data Studio, I have another table as well called as stones. Okay, so if I click on stones, and now stones has a primary key defined. Okay, uh, so let me show you how the table looks like. So the table has ID, stone, name, carrot. It looks very similar to cars, but the only difference is uh, the stones has a primary key defined and the cars does not have a primary key defined. See here, there's no PK. And here you can see PK. So I'm going to use stones in this example. Okay, so this table stones. So let me go back and select stones table. Now, Stones table already has a primary key defined, so it will be a good candidate for us to use it in the Dataverse virtual table. I click on next. A configuration screen appears and it will list down the Dataverse schema details and the display name. And I'll just click on next. So on the left hand side, you'll see a SQL Server configuration. On the right hand side, it will show you Dataverse table configuration. I'm okay with the defaults. I click on finish. The moment I click on finish, uh, Power Platform is going to create a virtual table, which is essentially acting as a pointer to the SQL Server database table underneath it. Okay, so virtual table is just a stable definition. It does not hold any data. Data is stored in your SQL Server only. Now let it load. In the meanwhile, what I'll do is I'll go to Power Pages. I have already created a site called as Ruby, and I'm in the edit mode of that site. Okay, so I'll click before we even add a page. What we can do is like first we need to find out uh, whether that database has been created or not. Sorry, the data table. Okay, now, if I click on data and if I start typing, say, stones, okay, I can see that table is already provisioned now. Okay, so I click Girish stones here and it might take a while to fetch in the information. Uh, I will select some additional columns. So, Girish stones and yeah, let me select ID as well. And say save. Okay, so if you see here, I've selected three columns basically, okay, which is part of the SQL Server. Now, Girish Stone is like a GUID in dataverse, so I'm happy with the table. Let me create one view, okay, for this. So I'll create a new view and I'll call it as, for namesakes, Girish Stone's view, which I'm going to use it in my Power Pages, and I'll add again a couple of columns in this view. So I will add ID. I will add maybe maybe value. Okay, so this is just a random columns I'm just putting in the column over here. I click on save and I click on publish. So now I have created a table. I have created a view. Let's surface this information in our Power Pages site. Okay. Uh, Let me show you the solution as well. In solution, if you see, we have added a virtual table. Now this is technically a virtual table which is being added over here. You know, if I put any information over here, this information will get populated in SQL Server. Okay. I'm not going to do that. What I'll do is I'll first go into pages and I'll create a new page and I'll call it as maybe stone page. Okay. I click on add, and here I will click on list. Okay. Now, if I click on list, I click on new list and then choose a table. I'll type in stones, Giri stones of stones. Okay. And select the data view. I've created this Giri stones view. Okay, with this, I'll call this list as say TSV and click on done. Okay. Now I need to set some permission in order for it to be exposed to an end user. So I'll say, let me assume that I give all the permission as of now, okay, which ideally shouldn't do that, but I'm doing for the sake of time. Uh, I'll select the roles as anonymous user, and now this particular table will be displayed for all the users who has not even been signed into the application. Okay, so I'm okay with that. I click on sync, and the moment I do a sync, this configuration information gets published in the backend. And if I click on preview and I click on desktop, then you should technically see a page which loads the information from a virtual table which is internally connected to Microsoft SQL Server. So that's an Azure SQL in the backend. So any information you add in the backend. So let me add an information over here. What I can do is maybe I'll go into the backend and maybe if I go into stones and I'll say edit data and maybe add a new row. Let me add a new row and call it as that's platinum. Add it as 17. Okay. Save this record. Then technically this information which I've saved in the backend SQL Server, it should get surfaced over a period of time in the Power Pages site. So I have just refreshed it. It might take a while for this information to sync up. Uh, First, the information will be loaded in the Dataverse virtual table. And once that information is published in Dataverse virtual table, this will get propagated back to Microsoft Power Pages. So let me refresh this and see whether that information is populated or not. And even I'll refresh this. So I should see platinum over here, and I should see platinum over here as well in the backend. So I can see platinum over here in the backend, and in the stones page, if I just do a like maybe an F12, just do a empty cache and hard refresh, then this information should be displayed over here as well. Now this information is not yet reflected. Let me sync this site configuration. So now I have added more information in the backend. Let me refresh the screen and see whether the information is populated or not. And it should take a while. I'll just sync the configuration. And as you see, this information is now populated in the backend. And then it is surfaced out in the Power Pages site as well. So that's it, folks. This is how you connect a virtual table pointing to a SQL server and surface out the information in Power Pages. Thanks for watching.